you doing?
Playing a game.
I play?
Sure.
What's it called?
Slowing the water down.
How do you do that?
Do that by finding a good play. Here's a good one. Now watch. A good play does two things. When I lift the rock, I invite the water onto a slower path. When I place the rock, I block it from going down the faster path. Now the water's more spread out. It's flowing slower as a Remember, you create a new path before opposing the current path.
What's the best play you've ever made?
Well, that's hard to say. If you keep playing this game all your life and make 10,000 plays, are those plays part of the play I made here today by teaching you the game?
I guess they would be.
There's a quotation I always liked. You can count the number of seeds in an apple, but you can't count the number of apples in a seed. Everything in the world is telling stories. Stories of how they came to be in this position right now. So many kinds of stories. Tracks of the past, spirals of change, and the fit. So many lovely stories of the fit. The fit is like the quartz rock I found in a stream bed. It had such a pure color to it, I picked it up. And then 10 feet later I came upon another rock of the same pure color. And curious, I put them together. The fit was so perfect that I know without a doubt that those two rocks were once part of the same rock. That's what the fit is. When two different parts of the world fit together so perfectly that you know a bigger story connects them. Like the way the greenest, tallest grass of the new season fits with the ant nest of last year. That fit tells us that the ants are composting the earth and making it fertile ground. But probably the most important kind of story we'll need is stages of the process. Flowers taught me this kind of story. See, up in the mountains, the ground is snow-free for only a few months, so the plants up there have to grow real fast. As the melting snowbanks recede, they expose brown ground, but within hours, the green tips of plants are emerging. Plants further from the snowbank are taller because they've had more time to grow, and beyond them are plants starting to flower. Moving my eyes back and forth from the snowbank is like moving my eyes back and forth through time. If I observe the plants in the proper sequence, I can watch change that's normally too slow to see. Or if I examine a cluster of desert flowers, I can see the different stages in the process by which a plant produces its seeds. And it's not just plants. A fresh gopher mound is easily noticeable because it looks like loose dirt. Older mounds are less visible because the air spaces have been squeezed out. If I look at these mounds in the proper sequence, and I see a story, the soil wants to settle into a solid heaviness that squeezes out all air, but the gophers keep stirring the earth and air together, which allows the rains to soak in deeper. We can also look at rocks within a stream. Rocks along the small streams near the headwaters are still rough and blocky because they've not tumbled very far, while rocks along the big river downstream have been smoothed and rounded by all their tumbling. All of these stories are happening slower than we have time to watch. During our lives, we actually observe only small slices of the actual process. But if we look at the stages around us in the proper sequence, then we see processes all around us. We can run our eyes back and forth over the world and grow more aware of the slow changes we live within. As we see more and more things changing, the world starts to connect together into a larger story in which everything is flowing. Now, flow is complex. It's like a river. When you first see a river, You notice the water moving downstream. But if you spend time on that river, you come to know that the water is moving every which way. Flow pushes water up into upwellings, sucks it down into whirlpools, spins the current off into eddies flowing upstream. Flow is a wondrous dance, always swirling and moving different ways in different places. And it's not just water. We live within the midst of great flows and small flows, swirling and eddying throughout our lives. As we pay more attention to these flows, we begin encountering the rules of flow over and over again.
What are the rules of flow?
If things flow in faster than they flow away, they accumulate. If things flow in slower than they flow away, they diminish.
That's it? That's pretty simple.
The rules of flow do start off pretty simple. Inflow greater than outflow accumulates. Inflow less than outflow diminishes. But these rules have lots of implications. For example, every inflow is some other place's outflow, and every outflow we see is an inflow for another place. Flows join the world. For example, the seeds carried by ants, are they flowing out of the field or into the nest? Any accumulation alerts us to a flow. If cars catch up faster than they can pass, they accumulate. Kids learn the special places where money accumulates. Whenever you find an accumulation, something in some way is flowing. The rule of flow grows more complex when it leads us to the idea of the relative balance. What determines whether something accumulates or diminishes is not the size of the inflow or the size of the outflow, but the relative balance between the two. If I eat more calories than I burn, my weight increases. If I eat less calories than I burn, my weight diminishes. It's like walking across a teeter-totter. Though the change is gentle and steady, there comes a point where the balance shifts and things tilt to the other direction. There are always two ways to change a relative balance. If you want more money, you can earn more or spend less. If you want a hotter shower, you can turn up the hot water or turn down the cold.
What happens when inflow equals outflow? What happens then?
What do you think will happen?
It seems like nothing would change, and yet it does.
Yeah, that's what's so tricky about flow. It has two levels.
2 levels.
Yeah, 2 levels. Here's a question that might help. What's the difference between a car backing up and traffic backing up?
Well, when a car backs up, you put it in reverse and you actually go backwards. When traffic backs up, like at a signal, everybody's still going forward, but the traffic gets thicker backward, back farther and farther and farther, where people have to put their brakes on, and the road gets full, more full, and everybody's got to slow down, and that slowdown point goes back farther and farther and farther.
The difference between the cars and the traffic is the difference between the 2 levels. The lower level is that level of what is actually moving, the cars. The upper level is the appearance created by those flowing things, the traffic. Flowing water is the lower level. The water level is the upper level. Or dirty clothes are the lower level, while the laundry pile they form is the upper level. The world is like clouds. Even though the flow of water vapor through the atmosphere is what's really happening, it's the upper level appearance of clouds that catch our eyes. It's easier to think of the world in terms of the upper level appearances than it is to see the lower level of what is actually flowing. Think of sea level as a cloud. It is the upper level appearance of all the water and ice flowing in, all the water evaporating out. See bodies as clouds. They are the upper level creation of flows of food and water flowing through. See the mountains as clouds. They are the upper level appearance of a continental flow of bedrock rising up and flowing back as broken rock. Anyway, you asked what happens if inflow equals outflow. That's an important question because balanced flows like this fill the world. What happens with a balanced flow is that the upper level appears so still and serene that the lower level becomes invisible, and we can forget things are flowing. If these flows remain invisible to us, then it grows easy to take their stable upper-level appearances for granted. They appear unchanging, so it seems like they will endure forever. But all it takes is a shift in the relative balance, and something we take for granted, like a beach or a forest, can change. That's why seeing the world as flow is really important. Many of the problems we grapple with are the result of us unwittingly shifting the relative balance of some flow, and later finding that some upper-level thing we had taken for granted, like the ozone layer, or the Gulf Stream, or the middle class, is flowing away. Understanding how things can accumulate or diminish depending on the relative balance, this is really important. And the most important flow of all to understand is that flow described by the Second Law of Thermodynamics.
What is thermodynamics?
Thermodynamics. It's the science of how energy flows, and its second law is the most powerful, pervasive pattern shaping the universe. The mathematics of that pattern is beyond most of us, but we know it well because it's been shaping our life ever since we were born. Even a young child will instantly recognize a violation of the second law. We know that ripples are supposed to spread out. We know that balls are supposed to bounce lower each time. Energy flows like a river downstream towards less usable energy. Things tend to run down. This pattern so strongly shapes the universe that it poses a challenge. How can life survive? Clearly life does, but how is creation possible within a universe where energy fades away? Thinking of a roller coaster can help us understand that the second law does not say that all things can only move down. The second law allows the cars to go back uphill. It just won't let them coast up as high as they drop down. Therefore, the ride will eventually come to a stop. Or watch an eddy. The second law does not prohibit water from flowing upstream. It just requires more water to flow downstream somewhere else. Life on Earth is like the part of the eddy moving upstream, and all the energy flowing from the sun is like the downstream flow that drives the eddy. Up is possible, but every up can only happen if there is a greater down somewhere else. That is the challenge the second law gives to life. Every living thing wants their body to be the up and have someone else be the down. Cells do this, animals do this, nations do it. This leads to what I call the first solution to the problem posed by the second law. The first solution says, draw a circle between you and everything else. Take from the outside whatever you need, and dump into the outside whatever you have to get rid of. Your survival requires something else to be sacrificed, so get good at it. Many people wish the universe was somehow different, was somehow nicer. But every living animal depends on this first solution. This path is ancient and venerable, and it is an absolutely essential part of our being alive in a universe that is shaped by the second law. However, there is an attitude that can creep in. An attitude of, well, it's all going to run down anyway, and there's nothing we can do about it, so we might as well just make ourselves comfortable. In a sophisticated sort of way. This attitude blinds our vision. It makes hope feel naive. Our spirit is into a, might as well get it while we can, consuming attitude. We are wrong to do this, because life has also discovered a second solution to the challenge posed by the second law. This second solution inspires hope and nourishes creative work. The story of the second solution is the story I'll share with you tomorrow. It's a dance. The top of the stick is dancing with your eyes. The top of the stick leads, your eyes follow. And then your eyes and your hand dance, with the eyes leading and your hand following. And then your hand in the bottom of the stick dance, with your hand leading the bottom of the stick following. And then the bottom of the stick and the top of the stick dance, with the bottom of the stick leading and the top of the stick following. It's this spiral dance that goes around and around. Each part of this dance dances between being the cause and being the effect. This circling dance of cause and effect is called a feedback spiral. And feedback spirals contain a magical power to bring things into existence. The story of the upward spiral. How has life changed this earth? In the beginning, there was no life, and now it exists. How has its presence changed the way this world works? Up here, I gaze out over miles of stages in a thousands of year process. Glaciers once filled these valleys, and when the glaciers melted, they left behind glacial polished and jumbles of rock. In the thousands of years since, a forest has filled the valley below. Up here is like an early stage in this process, where bare rock still reigns supreme, while down in the forest is a later stage. If I follow these slopes down with the proper focus, it can be like walking through time as a forest appears around me, and I can watch how life changes the land. This process by which a forest appears is called succession. I was taught to see succession as an example of the first solution. The plants are competing for the limited resource of sunlight. In this struggle, successively taller plants shade out and kill the earlier shorter plants. But something more is happening than that. Up here, roots cannot penetrate the solid bedrock, so rock touches sky. Snowmelt follows the shape of bedrock, washing away any rock grains that could help form soil. This is how the world looked like before life. But in the few places where bedrock levels out, the snowmelt slows and flakes of granite settle out. Moss can grow on these moist level deposits of sand and gravel, and this starts a feedback spiral. The moss filters out every rock grain washing across it, which expands the mat of moss. These expanding mats sponge up more of the water, allowing them to expand onto dry bedrock far away from the channels. As generations of moss die, they become soil, and other plants take root. Firmly anchored mats can even flow over edges and down steep surfaces. Bedrock disappears beneath dark moistness. Large rocks tumbling down these slopes hit the mats and are slowed by their squishy softness. Just as spider webs catch passing flies, so these spongy mats trap passing rocks. Rocks tumble less far. The outflow of eroding rocks from these mountains slows down. Like traffic, the flow of rocks backs up. The individual rocks are not moving back up slope, but their upper level flow accumulates and begins piling up and covering the bedrock. Further down, I find neat plants colonizing the hot, dry domes of glacial polish. These plants form dams, contouring across the bedrock. These dams halt the slow flow of rock flakes and gather them into a gritty soil which can absorb more of the summer rain. It's a feedback spiral. As the dams grow taller, they can hold more soil, which absorbs more moisture, which helps the plants grow the dams taller. These contouring lines of plants are slowly covering the sloping bedrock with level terraces of rocky soil. In the forest, I find pine needles damming the trails. Their wet surfaces stick together, binding them into a wet, soggy mass that clogs runoff. After the runoff has passed, these dams deflate, and we can see how much sand they have trapped behind them. The trails are spanned by narrow dams. The gentle slopes are contoured by long dams. I love the way leaf dams heal. If a dam is breached, water pours through. But this flow carries floating leaves to the breach where they stick as they pass through, and the breach fills in. Leaf dams are so stable that they form even in paved gutters, where street sweepers have to sweep them away before they cover the pavement with asphalt cracking soil. Can you feel the dancing feedback spiral between trees, soil, and water? These dams slow the flow of water and soil, which helps the trees grow larger, which produces more leaves, which can create more dams to slow the flows even more. But there's even more going on in these spirals, because feedback spirals contain this mysterious power to bring things into existence. Slowed water warms up, and plants decompose, and animals add nutrients, and a new chemistry comes into existence that decomposes bedrock at a faster rate. More life creates more soil, which holds more water, which nourishes more life, which creates more soil. Earth rises over the bedrock. This flow of rocks is not the only thing that's accumulating upon the land. Did you know that on average the Earth receives from the ocean only 11 inches of rain a year? 11 inches. That's hardly enough for a desert. Most of the water that evaporates out of the ocean falls back onto the ocean before it can ever reach land. The rain that does fall on the land begins to flow back to the sea, just like the water cycle I was taught about in school. But what I wasn't taught in school was that life has created a billion ways to slow and reroute that outflow. Mats of moss and dams of leaves are small examples. Beaver dams are more spectacular examples. Beaver build dams which form ponds that increase the shoreline, along which grow the plants that beaver love to eat. But these dams also hold more of the winter snowmelt high in the watershed, slowing its flow back towards the sea. But the most important shifter in the water cycle is plant transpiration. Plants suck fresh water up into their leaves. Some of that water is used in photosynthesis, but most of it evaporates from all those sun-warmed thin surfaces of leaves. This transpired water evaporates back into the sky, where it will fall again. This recycled rain starts moving downslope again, but much of it will again be raised by the plants back into the sky. This recycling almost triples the amount of rain that falls on the land. Life has taken the sun's small and precious gift of fresh water from the sea and increased it to a level that can support forests. It's another feedback spiral. Plants recycle fresh water, which nourishes more plants, which recycle more water. Like the water cycle, photosynthesis is inspirationally more than I was taught. Photosynthesis is more than the conversion of solar energy into biological energy. It is also the taking of a formless gas, carbon dioxide, and a liquid, water, and converting them into sugar molecules, which are the building blocks with which plants create solid surfaces. Photosynthesis is the creation of surfaces. Thickets of ferns, the convoluted bark of trees, the surfaces of all those leaves, both filling the sky and falling upon the ground. Where sky once touched smooth bedrock, vast layers of surfaces now rise. Surfaces hold the rain, buffer the wind, and provide resting places. Soil's magic comes from the exponentially vast amount of surfaces it contains. An explosion of surface area covers the earth. And I mean explosion literally too, Michael, because there's something really important about all this surface area. Imagine this cattail as being the earth when it was just smooth bedrock with very little surface. The flame of life can only smolder. But when life increases the surfaces on this earth, the flame of life explodes. Creating surfaces dramatically changes how fast things flow, and everything is flowing. By creating vast amounts of surface, life is altering rates of inflow and outflow, shifting relative balances on a scale more massive than we can imagine. Succession, the creation of a forest, that's more than a competition for the limited resource of sunlight. Succession, it's the sunlight-fueled creation of one of the most limited resources of them all, surfaces. And that, too, is a feedback spiral, because sunlight fuels the creation of more leaves, and more leaves absorb more sunlight. As more solar energy is absorbed, life can actually lift things upward, and things once impossible become possible. Once upon a time, for example, rivers were just a one-way flow, washing nutrients from the land back down to the sea. But now, rivers are highways for the salmon. Each salmon, returning upstream to spawn, brings in its body many pounds of nitrogen and phosphorus from the sea. After they spawn, they die. And their bodies drift into the shallows where scavengers feed on their carcasses. Later, these scavengers defecate the sea's fertility throughout the surrounding woodlands. The trees grow strong and tall, shading the streams and keeping the water cold for the next generation of salmon. This upstream flow of nutrients from ocean to forest was once impossible. Now, thanks to the salmon, it exists. This upstream flow is an example of what I call the second solution to the second law of thermodynamics. The first solution is to compete for whatever energy is within the system. The second solution is to increase the possibilities within the system by changing flows and shifting relative balances. You see, just like any other flow, the flow of energy has two levels. When the second law says that energy must flow down towards less possibilities, it is referring only to its lower level. Like traffic, energy on the upper level can back up and accumulate. As it does so, new possibilities come into existence. Once upon a time, things like flight and vision and consciousness were impossible. Impossible in the sense that they had never existed in the entire history of the planet. And now they do. We are surrounded by millions of species that are absorbing energy into the Earth system and are so changing the rate by which things flow that amazing possibilities are accumulating all around us. The upper level accumulation of all these flows we call the environment. Our environment is not a given. It has been created by and is actively maintained by life. With feedback spirals, life has been gradually raising the world to higher and higher energy levels. I call this rising into possibilities the upward spiral. And it's all more beautiful than I was ever taught to imagine.
That is a good story.
But that's only the first part.
There's more?
Yes, because there is the downward spiral too. The spirals of cause and effect can spiral in the other direction too, towards less possibilities. I know, because I've watched it happen. Several places I love have been gashed by gullies. Gullies begin when the runoff acquires enough erosive power to wash some of the soil away. This starts a feedback spiral, because the slightly deeper channel allows the runoff to concentrate upon a narrower path, where it flows faster, which gives it more energy to erode more soil, which deepens the channel still more. It's like a flat file sharpening into a saw blade. A deepening gully steepens the slope of every side drainage. This steepening speeds the runoff, and the same spiral of erosion begins clawing its way up each side channel. Gullies cut down into the water table. Groundwater that used to percolate slowly through the soil now seeps into gullies where it flows quickly away. Outflow becomes greater than inflow, and groundwater diminishes. The water table drops as the land's lifeblood oozes away. Less plants can grow, so the soil receives less protection from the baking sun and the pounding rain. Less plants offer less surface to hinder the runoff's passage, so the runoff flows faster. It's like losing your brakes on a hill. The runoff gathers into the main drainages faster, creating higher surges of water, which cut the gullies even deeper, draining even more of the groundwater. Possibilities drain away as the soil and the gift of rain and life spiral down.
Can't anything be done to stop it?
That's what I started wondering. I see these beautiful places bleeding to death, and I started wondering, is there some way I can dance through the rain and the land that can reverse this downward spiral? Each gully kept asking that question until I could ignore it no longer.
What did you do?
I went out into the rain and started making plays.
What happened?
I tried to stop the runoff and its momentum. and quickly learned I couldn't. I learned instead to use its momentum to lead it onto a new path, a slower path along which more of the water soaked in. I tried to work in the gullies since that was where the problem seemed to be, but I learned that the gullies were only the downstream effect and that the cause lay upslope, where the rain first began running off instead of soaking in. Up there lay hundreds of small possibilities for spreading the runoff. At first they seemed insignificant. However, each play created opportunities for other plays downstream. The work grows on itself. As more of the water is led on the slower paths around the gullies, less runoff reaches the gullies. Without large flushing flows, the gullies began silting in, which allows plants to grow there, which slows and traps even more silt. The power of the saw blade is dulled by this flat bottom. As the gullies fill in, the groundwater cannot drain away as quickly, and the water table rises. More plants can grow, which protect the soil from the pounding rain and the beating sun. Does this series of cause and effect sound familiar?
It feels like what was happening with erosion, except going the other way.
Yes, that's what I learned. When relative balances shift, spirals of cause and effect can reverse. A process that I once cursed as an enemy can silently transform into an ally, creating possibilities I had not imagined. Each time another ally emerges, it whispers, "Do not underestimate what is possible. This work grows on itself. Don't let your current understanding block you from doing this work." When I began this work, I saw myself as opposing the runoff and stopping erosion. But this work has grown into a meditation on the two powers.
The two powers?
Yes, you see, rain has a potential energy that can grow in two different ways. If the rain runs off, its energy becomes an erosive power that washes away soil. But if the rain soaks in, it becomes a nourishing power that creates soil. Two powers, the power to drain away possibilities and the power to create them. It can go either way. The first power is highly visible as it roars through the gullies for a few hours. Power, concentrated like this, is the kind we can see and learn to want. The second power is invisible. The water soaks quietly into the ground and disappears. Its power is diffused over the broad slopes and spread out over weeks of silent growing. Though this power is invisible, it contains the power to raise the earth, something that the power concentrated within gullies can never do. My work is in service to this invisible power. I shift relative balances so that more of the rain soaks in to become this power to bring upward spirals into existence. I can't tell you what a blessing it is to walk in gullies that were once bare dirt and are now filled with flowers, to hear birds sing and know that I helped create those songs by slowing the water which nourished more plants, which fed more insects that fed more birds. To feel my spirit transforming from a cynical, "what can one person do?" into a magical, "what can one person do?" The fields begin whispering of a new possibility. If all the world is flowing, could this work be a metaphor that can guide the reversal of other downward spirals elsewhere? Like, go high in the drainage. What might that mean? Don't oppose the momentum. Lead it onto new paths instead. Help the energy soak in rather than run off. Begin with small shifts that are within your power to make. The work will grow on itself as allies emerge. This voice grows louder. Share these stories. Your stories just might help others nourish other upward spirals. But then the rain stops, and I return into a culture that calls us consumers rather than creators. A culture so thick with trances luring people into buying until they get pinned by debt to a bottom line far beneath their highest calling. I return to movies filled with orange explosions that teach us to cheer for death, to a politics that polarizes rather than draws us together into a great work. In that world, I hear another voice. If you talk about your fields, you're going to look really stupid. The reason you work all alone in your precious field is because nobody else cares. You have no power to oppose the world's momentum. This sneering voice often stuns my will, until another storm calls me out into the fields, and again I see the upward spirals developing all around me, and I feel how simple and right life can be. I feel science and religion, so often seen as pointing in opposing directions, as both pointing towards a great truth, that there is a direction shaping the universe, and we can use this direction to orient our lives. If we live mindless of this direction, then our lives will be just a consumption of possibilities. But if we live mindfully, if we inspire in one another ethical behavior, shining eyes, and joyful dedication to good work, then we can know the blessings of bringing impossibilities into existence. And I hear the fields replying to that sneering voice, we don't have to oppose the world's momentum. Go far upstream instead and offer it a new path. That's what these stories can be, a way of seeing the world that helps our power soak in. As more soaks in, less remains to run off. Relative balances will shift, transforming enemies into allies. This work grows on itself. Don't let your current understanding block you from doing this work. We have no idea what is possible. This whispering I hear in the fields, is it true? I don't know. So I have to tell my story and find out. Now, Michael, if this simple algae has the power to create land, think of the power within us. What can we do with our gifts? We have feet with which to dance and explore and search. We have eyes with which to see beauty and new patterns. We have consciousness with which to understand and dream and plan. We have hands with which we can wield tools that can help us bring these dreams into existence. And we have voices.
The freedom of the hill!
With which to sing and pray and teach and share visions. What is possible with these amazing gifts? The world is inviting us to dance with her in ways that have never been danced before. What will your life's dance be within this upward spiral?